Trump's press secretary fired off a scathing retort at a press conference that left everyone in stunned silence. "Your rhetoric isn't inspiring. It's inciting violence," he thundered, his voice echoing off the walls as he addressed Ilhan Omar and the Democratic establishment. In that charged moment, his words cut through the noise of partisan bickering, exposing what he called dangerous, violence-inciting language. The room exploded with murmurs and a mix of shocked disbelief and fervent support as cameras captured every second of this unforgettable confrontation. Without missing a beat, he launched into a detailed critique of the statements made by Omar and her allies. "For too long, you've been using inflammatory language that not only divides us, but actively fuels unrest," he continued, his tone measured yet searing with intensity. "When you glorify actions that lead to violence, you aren't standing for justice. You're fanning the flames of chaos." His words were precise and relentless, each sentence building on the previous one like a well-coordinated barrage. Reporters scrambled to jot down his every word, and social media immediately lit up with hashtags and live updates. This wasn't a scripted political maneuver. It was a raw, impassioned outburst that felt like a turning point in political discourse. He cited specific incidents, pointing to videos and eyewitness reports of protests that spiraled into violence. "Look at what happens when unchecked aggression is celebrated," he demanded, gesturing emphatically as if challenging the very foundation of the arguments against him. "When you use your platform to encourage disorder, you're not only betraying the trust of your constituents, but endangering the very fabric of our society." His eyes swept over the audience, daring anyone to challenge his claims. The air was thick with tension, as even the most skeptical observers felt the gravity of his accusations. In a powerful moment that resonated with many, he recalled the words of those affected by such rhetoric. "Imagine the families torn apart by violent protests, the neighborhoods left in ruins because leaders chose to incite rather than heal," he said, his voice softening momentarily with the weight of his message. "We have a duty to protect our communities from the destructive power of hate speech. Every careless word can become a spark that ignites a wildfire of chaos." The statement hit like a ton of bricks, and there was a palpable shift in the room as his words sank in. Even some of his detractors seemed forced to acknowledge the harsh reality behind the statistics he cited. The press secretary then pivoted to an even more personal note. "I stand here not just as a spokesman for President Trump, but as a guardian of our national security and our shared values," he declared, his voice rising in a crescendo of defiance. "If our leaders can't take responsibility for their words, then who will? When you incite violence, you erode the trust that holds our society together. We can't let that happen. Not on my watch." His declaration was both a warning and a rallying cry, urging those in power to remember the weight of their words and the real-life consequences that follow. The intensity of his delivery was so compelling that the room fell into a heavy silence, each person reflecting on the implications of his passionate call for accountability. As the press conference continued, the press secretary deftly fielded questions from reporters. One journalist dared to challenge him on whether his remarks were politically motivated. With a steely gaze, he replied, "This isn't about politics. It's about protecting lives. It's about ensuring that our words don't lead to senseless violence and destruction." His response, both succinct and forceful, silenced further debate. It was clear that his mission was not to score political points, but to address a systemic issue that had plagued the nation for too long. Throughout the ensuing discussion, he maintained a relentless focus on the consequences of inciting rhetoric. When influential figures use their platforms irresponsibly, they don't just express an opinion, they set off a chain reaction, he explained. We've seen how incendiary language has led to riots, injuries, and even deaths. This is not hyperbole. This is the stark reality we face every day. Our leaders must be held accountable for the words they choose, because those words can be the difference between order and chaos. His argument was bolstered by references to recent events that had left communities reeling, turning abstract concerns into a concrete call to action. In a particularly charged exchange, he directly confronted the Democratic critics, laying bare what he saw as their hypocrisy. "You preach about equality and justice," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "yet your actions often encourage division and violence. How do you reconcile that contradiction? When you celebrate aggression and use your rhetoric to justify mob mentality, you aren't advancing a noble cause, you're undermining our very democracy." His words resonated powerfully with the audience, many of whom had grown weary of the constant cycle of outrage and backlash. The press secretary's challenge was not just a critique, it was an invitation to rethink the norms of political dialogue and to embrace a higher standard of accountability. As the debate raged on, the atmosphere in the room grew increasingly charged. The press secretary's unwavering focus and intense delivery forced even his staunchest critics to pay attention. His ability to weave together a narrative that was at once personal, statistical, and moral made his arguments almost impossible to ignore. We live in a time when every word is amplified, when social media can turn a single statement into a national controversy, he said. That power comes with responsibility. If you choose to use your words to incite violence, then you must be prepared to face the consequences of a society that will no longer tolerate such recklessness. His speech culminated in a final, memorable declaration that seemed to encapsulate the entire event. "I call on every leader, every public figure, and every citizen to think before they speak," he thundered. "Let's replace hate with hope, aggression with understanding, and division with unity. Our nation deserves better, and it starts with holding ourselves accountable for the power of our words." The resounding applause that followed was not just for the eloquence of his speech, it was an outpouring of collective resolve, a shared commitment to demand better from those who wield influence over our lives. In the aftermath of the press conference, the video of the event went viral. Social media platforms exploded with reactions. Tweets, posts, and live discussions dissected every nuance of his performance. Hashtags like #No More Incitement and #Words Matter began trending as viewers from all corners of the political spectrum weighed in on the call for accountability in public discourse. News outlets and cultural commentators picked up the story, and debates about the role of rhetoric in inciting violence became a recurring theme in national discussions. The ripple effect of that day was profound. Community leaders and activists organized public forums to discuss the importance of responsible speech, and academic institutions invited experts to speak about the societal impacts of inciting language. The press secretary's words were analyzed in classrooms and discussed in think tanks as a turning point in how political communication should be handled. His address became a reference point, a benchmark for how powerful, principled speech can challenge and change entrenched narratives. Not everyone was quick to embrace his message, however. Critics argued that his rhetoric was just as divisive as that of his opponents, and some saw his tone as overly confrontational. Yet even his detractors couldn't deny the undeniable impact of his performance. The event forced a nation to confront the consequences of words left unchecked, and it set off a national dialogue that extended far beyond the confines of that press conference room. Over the following weeks, interviews with experts in media, politics, and conflict resolution highlighted the significance of the event. "It's a wake-up call," one commentator remarked. "We are in an era where the spoken word can literally set the stage for real-world violence. The press secretary's address forces us to examine what kind of discourse we are willing to tolerate." Another expert pointed out that the debate had shifted the conversation from partisan politics to a more universal concern about social responsibility. The press secretary's performance was hailed as a bold, necessary intervention that challenged everyone to think about the impact of their words. As the nation digested the event, grassroots movements emerged, calling for higher standards in political communication. Campaigns to promote responsible speech and to educate the public about the power of language began to gain traction. Local communities organized workshops and seminars aimed at fostering respectful dialogue and reducing the polarizing effects of incendiary rhetoric. The legacy of that day became a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in a polarized society, there is always the potential for a single, powerful speech to inspire collective action. In the midst of all the debates and discussions, one message remained clear: our words carry immense power. They can build bridges or burn them down, heal wounds or inflict new ones. The press secretary's address was not just a political statement. It was a call to all of us to use our voices responsibly, to challenge incitement wherever we see it, and to hold ourselves and our leaders accountable for the language that shapes our society. Reflecting on the events of that day, many have come to see the press conference as a turning point in national discourse. It was a moment when the consequences of reckless speech were laid bare for all to see, a moment that demanded introspection and sparked a movement toward more mindful, compassionate communication. Whether you agree with every word he said or not, there is no denying that his address has left an indelible mark on the way we think about public rhetoric and its impact on our lives. This event stands as a reminder that we are all responsible for the words we choose, and that sometimes the most powerful change comes not from grand gestures or sweeping reforms, but from a single moment of clarity and conviction. It challenges us to reconsider how we engage with those who hold opposing views and to strive for a level of discourse that elevates rather than divides. The press secretary's words echo far beyond that fateful press conference. They continue to inspire debates, inform public policy, and most importantly, remind us that our voices matter. So, as you watch this video, take a moment to reflect on the power of language. Ask yourself, how can I use my words to build a better, more compassionate world? What kind of legacy do I want to leave with the way I speak and engage with others? The story of that day is not just about a political showdown. It's about the enduring impact of every word we utter and the responsibility we share in shaping our society's future.